Well, looks like we had a situation in the virtual classroom today. I'm not sure if that was an error on the part. I mean, looks like mine it was working for sure, but looks like it wasn't working on the other end. So let's just record it. Um, as you can tell, we got quite a bit of work to do in this. We're going to go the way I have this written up. I believe from mercantilism to the great wars for empire. From mercantilism, if you will, to the great wars for empire. And the pre-revolutionary crisis. I'm gonna check to see if that's how I wanted to do that, but well, obviously, I mean, I wrote the dang thing, but you know what I'm saying is if I want to do that going forward this time around. Um, well, first thing we're going to talk about here is mercantilism. All right, so what is mercantilism? You might have also heard of it as the mercantile system. I almost can guarantee you probably were told about it, but it could have just gone through one ear and out the other. This is not to disrespect you, but what I'm saying is in your daily life, you probably just don't run into such terminologies, so many these types of phrases. So, all right, what is it? What is mercantilism? Mercantilism, if you will, originally it really equated wealth to dominance. It basically said, that the idea is to collect as much gold and silver as you can, and that was a true definition of your wealth. Um, in order to build up your economy, it should be backed with lots of gold and silver. I mean, you don't want to do this to the point of inflating, your economy, but at the very least, you do want, quite a bit of gold and silver. Um, Gold mainly, because silver would do an awful lot to inflate your, the more silver you have than gold, the more opportunity is to inflate, if you will, the economy. Well, purposes, if you will, purpose for the colonies. See, folks, the issue is that you just can't, you just can't, how do I put this? Okay, look, they weren't finding gold in the 13 colonies. Um, they weren't finding it. They had no idea. They weren't finding it. They'll find some later in the year 1799 in North Carolina, around Charlotte. But for right now, they are not finding this gold. And so that brings us to something Richard Hakluyt had said. Now, understand he is saying this before you have a Jamestown and all this other stuff, but he's saying this, and they figured that maybe a good idea to apply it to this. He is saying you should make any colonies that you're going to have, if you will, there for the sake of the benefit of the metropole. That you should these colonies should, if you will, sustain or help to sustain you financially. That you should be able to use these colonies to make profits from. So whether they're growing crops, whether they're providing you with timber, whether they're providing you with wool, whether they're providing you with a boatload of fish, they should make, basically they should be reaping profits to the point that sustains you, or at least helps to. All right. Well, with that in mind, that brings us to the Navigation Acts. The Navigation Acts makes it pretty clear. The Navigation and Trade Act makes it pretty clear that what the mother country wants to do, what the metropole wants to do, is to take these colonies and make sure that these colonies benefit, I guess the colonies too, but mainly to benefit the British, the mother country, the metropole. And no other colony outside of that. No other colony outside of that. I mean, no other power outside of that. So let's go to some of these navigation and trade acts, and there's so many, and I do not have them all. But the first one we're going to talk about is 1651, which is probably by this time Richard Hakluyt is dead because he made that proclamation in the 1580s. So the Navigation Act of 1651 basically says items such as tobacco, sugar, and other items that are coming out of North America must go to England. They're not supposed to go anywhere else. They must go to England. And basically the same thing for the Navigation Act of 1662. Pretty much says 1660 as well. Pretty much says the same thing. That these items must go to England. To England, nowhere else. Not to France, not to Spain, not to Portugal, nowhere else. Okay, so let's add to that. Let us add to that. In addition to that, we have the Navigation Staple Act. Now, the Navigation Staple Act says this. We are going to, how are we going to do this? Okay, the Navigation Staple Act says that any items that are coming in or out of the colony, in and out of the empire, okay, they must go to England first. And meanwhile, my Scandinavia. Okay. But they must, if you will, go to England first. Okay? They must go to England first. Now, once they go to England, then they could be transported to British ships. Okay, they transported the British ships, and then the British will do the rest of the work. See, understand, what does that mean? British sailors get paid. The owners of the ship, the ships, get profits. That we introduce a middleman into this, which one, is obviously slows things down a bit. And two, it allows, the people on this island right here to get paid. That's important, if you will, to keep in mind. So we have just taken some, so as they're going in, so France is going to Great Britain. Next thing you know, French are getting kicked off of the ships. I mean, well, they're not getting kicked off the ships, but they're transferring those goods and those items, if you will, to a British ship, where the British ship and the British crew will do the rest of the work. What you are doing is making sure that you can get as much profit from this trade as you can if you will, are the mother country of England. Now, in addition to this, you have, well, actually, you have a lot of stuff in addition to this, but continuing on, you have the Plantation Duty Act. What does the Plantation Duty Act say? It basically says the items that I just listed, such as, I suppose, tobacco, sugar, and others like that. Okay. All right. So you guys are going to smuggle this stuff in, huh? Look, we're going to let you do it. We're going to let you bring stuff in. We're going to let you, if you will, if you want to take this stuff to another power, then okay. But we expect you to pay a tax for that. And so the tax helps, if you will, pay money, or helps to pay and sustain the British Empire. So we'll profit off of it that way. Well, a number of a number of states obviously had issues with this act. And so that brings us now to Massachusetts, where Massachusetts decided that they weren't going to play along, and they had a lot of folks who were smuggling left and right and breaking laws um, regarding these navigation and trade acts. As a result, Great Britain revokes the charter of Massachusetts in 1688. I'm sorry, because they also did it in the 1700s as well. Probably why my mind got a little twisted there. Oh, quick note here. I'm not sure if you've ever been told this, but this is clearly projection problems. This area is about maybe as much smaller than this, and clearly Australia is a great deal larger, and Africa is many, many times larger. Okay, well, there's your 13 colonies right there. All the way from Maine in the top, or what is Massachusetts at the time, um, all the way down to Georgia. Okay, hang on a second. Yeah, okay. So the Wool Act of 1699. So just to give you an idea of how much of an iron hand Great Britain's going to have on the colonial American economy, um, here you go. The Wool Act of 1699. The Wool Act, if you will, of 1699. What does that say? Well, basically, it says that the wool is supposed to be for the British. You know, that the British have, if you will, dibs on wool. It's basically um, what it says. Um, Moving forward, do you want to make hats? You know, would you like to make hats? Well, if you do want to make hats, don't live, if you will, in Great Britain. Oh, excuse me, don't live in the United States. Well, there's no United States, but don't live in America. Because making of hats is prohibited, if you will, in America. Great Britain has made it illegal to make hats. Um, Iron. If you want to, if you want to make something from iron, the only thing you can do is make pig iron. So in other words, getting it from the ore and kind of organizing it. But you can't make, chains. You can't make, if you will, um, what else can't you make? You can't make wool. Excuse me, I'm sorry. No, you can't make. What am I talking about? Wool. Sorry. You can't make chains. You can't make anvils. You can't make toe toasters. Um, Horseshoes, I guess. You can't make any of those things. Rather, you can only do some level of primary manufacturing. So you put it in a position where it can be transported across the waters. And that is it. Now I know I just skipped one and you want to know about that, and certainly we're about to talk about it. It is the Molasses Act of 1733. Now, what does the Molasses Act of 1733 do? Well, before we do that, let's talk about the relationship between the colonies and British and French sugar. So now, when we talk about Molasses Act, the Molasses Act is really covering sugar products. So that is to say, it is covering It's talking about molasses, obviously, talking about sugar, talking about rum, and maybe some other things. Now, when we talk about British and French sugar, understand that they're not growing sugar in Great Britain, right? And they're not growing sugar in France, as far as I know. But rather, they are growing sugar in the West Indies. Remember, the British have colonies in the West Indies, and so, if you will, do the French. And so, if you will, do the French. So the British have colonies in the West Indies, so do the French. Okay, so the issue is that the British would rather have, obviously, the Americans growing, um, not growing, but trading or, purchasing French sugar. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, what did I just say? British sugar from the British West Indies. That's what they'd rather you do. Barbados and all that. That's what they would rather you do. Purchase, if you will, British sugar. Problem is that the British sugar colonies aren't trading for things that the Americans would like them to trade for, whether it be lumber, they're not trading for American products. They also aren't providing, if you will, gold and silver for, if you will, the American colonies either, like through coins. Well, the French are providing gold and silver coins. The French are, if you will, um, doing a better attempt at trade reciprocity. That's happening. And I believe even the price might be a little lower, perhaps. Well, what comes out of this is that the British say, "Oh, okay, so you're going to just purchase, you're just going to, you still want this, huh? Well, if you want French sugar, then you're going to have to pay for it because now we're going to, if you will, slap, if you will, a duty on that. We're going to charge you, a tax for purchasing French sugar." And that brings us to something that the Americans were very noted. Notice, they love to do this, and we don't talk about this enough. The Americans love to smuggle. I don't know what you heard in the past, but the Americans love to smuggle things in. They smuggle, we're going to be talking about all types of things they're smuggling. Now, we ain't talking about dope man smuggling, but we are talking more about, maybe sugar, later on tea, whatever. And so, they're smuggling in things, and I believe the British, certainly the customs officials realized this was going to be hard to stop. And so rather what they did was they kind of looked the other way. I mean, they clearly wanted to be bribed, but other than that, they looked the other way. It was known as salutary neglect. You have rules on the books that clearly say that these Americans and anyone else in the empire should not be trading for British sugar um, or be ready for a tax on it, Um, and and the and if you would, the customs officials just simply put, turn their back. And this is the reality, the status quo for about a good 30 years until 1763, where they start to look at the books and notice that there's a lot of money missing that should not be missing. Um, that the customs officials are not collecting enough. And so they kind of stomp on that a bit. We will be talking about that as we get closer to the Revolutionary War. Anyway, I don't know if you have any questions. Clearly, I wouldn't be able to hear them right now. But if you do, you can reserve them um, for when we see each other or through email. All right, take care and bye bye.